Good day, welcome. This is your Daily Med with Lady V. Today's lesson comes to us from Joshua chapter 24, from verse 29 through verse 33. Here we will see the death of Joshua, but some spiritual lessons that we can also learn from this servant of God. So we will see from today's lesson that the death of Joshua, as recorded in Joshua 24, 29 through 32, Joshua died at age 110 and was buried near his inheritance in Timnath, a hero of another generation, was honored as well, as the bones of Joseph were buried in Canaan, as he had requested. We can find that reference in Genesis chapter 50, verse 25. Eleazar, the high priest, Joshua's spiritual companion, also died and was buried. So according to Joshua chapter 24, reading from verse 29. And it came to pass after these things that Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the border of his inheritance in Timnath Serah, which is in Mount Ephraim, on the north side of the hill of Gash. And Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders that overlived Joshua, and which had known all the works of the Lord that he had done for Israel. And the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem, in a parcel of ground which Jacob bought of the sons of Amor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver, and it became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. And Eleazar, the son of Aaron, died, and they buried him in a hill that pertained to Phinehas his son, which was given him in Mount Ephraim. So we see from today's lesson three men of God. Their death was referenced: that of the priest, that of Joshua, and that of Joseph. So three burials, or three that are mentioned in these few verses, from verse 29 to verse 31, Joseph, verse 32, Eleazar, verse 33, and we have Joshua also being mentioned. All three were buried in Joseph's territory. All three had served their God and their country well. Joshua is called the servant of the Lord, like Moses in verse 29 and Deuteronomy 34 and verse 5. Joshua lived the same length of time as Joseph. We see that in verse 29 of Joshua chapter 24, and also Genesis 50 and verse 2. So we know these men served God and their country well. Joshua and Joseph were great deliverers during their lives. And of course, Eleazar was a deliverer in his death, for he was the high priest, and his death set free all those who had flee to a city of refuge. Joshua 20, verse 6. So, like the books of Genesis all the way to Deuteronomy, Joshua closes with the toll of the death bell over great godly men. God buries his workmen, but continues his work. What are some of the spiritual things that as children of God we can learn from such great a leader? What are some of the things that we see in his life that we can emulate? First and foremost, Joshua's life teaches us that a good leader must first be a good follower, must first be a good helper. And we see Joshua helping Moses and being a good follower of Moses, who was his mentor. Exodus chapter 17, verse 8 through 9. Exodus 24, verse 13. Exodus 33, verse 11. And Numbers 27, verse 16 through 23. We see also impossible situations in his life prove that it provides glorious opportunities to trust God. We find that story in Numbers 14, verses 6 through verse 9. We also find that even the most faithful men can allow fear to replace their faith. We also see that rash decisions made without prayer may be regretted. Joshua chapter 9, 1 through 27, especially when we look at chapter 9 and verse 14. We also see that we should stand up for our faith, whether or not anyone else is willing to do so. Our faith can set the example for others, especially those in our own family. And we see that in Joshua chapter 24 and verse 15. We also see that Joshua was a very old man when he was called to lead the Israelites. It did not matter about his age. God called him, commissioned him to take the Israelites across the Jordan River into the land that he had promised them, and Joshua was available. We also understand, if only the older generation had believed Joshua and Caleb, that the people in the land were helpless praise to them. Instead, they saw them as giants, and the only thing they could have seen is giants. And in comparison, they compare themselves to grasshoppers. And because of that, they were in the wilderness for so many years before actually getting to the land that God had promised them, the land flowing with milk and honey. But we know that Joshua, the servant of God, along with his companion Caleb, was the ones who came back, gave a good report. Out of 12 spies, 10 gave the negative report. And so we will see from this man's life that it's not all the time the majority is carrying the right report, because he, along with his companion, carried the right report. it was not the majority, and so it was not taken, and it had caused them to wander for many years when they could have reached the promised land earlier than they did. So today, of course, we can see some spiritual truths or some things that we can take from this great servant of God, Joshua. God bless you. Thank you again for watching. Please like, please share, also comment, and don't forget to visit my YouTube channel, Daily Med with Lady V.